welcome to the show where we share the stories of the many who intersect with our healthcare system but are rarely heard from. My name is Kevin Poe, founder and editor of KevinMD. Rate and review the show at kevinmd.com/rate. Subscribe at kevinmd.com/follow. Today in the show, we have Cobin Soelberg. He is an anesthesiologist and a financial planner. His KevinMD article is titled, "There Are So Many Paths to Financial Freedom." Cobin, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me today, Kevin.
We'll get into your article in a little bit. First, briefly share your story and journey to where you are today.
Thank you. So my path through medicine is a little bit winding. I started med school, it's been almost 20 years ago. And after my second year of med school, I took some time off and went and got a law degree at the University of Pennsylvania and studied a lot of health law, tax law, and things like that. And that was always part of the plan. And I wasn't totally sure at the time how I was going to use that in medicine. And I started my career in academics and ended up getting roped into a lot of the things, the intersection with Joint Commission or with Medicare and CMS, and really enjoyed doing that. But where I found I ended up using that training more than anything was teaching personal finance to my medical residents. And so that quickly became my go-to topic in the operating room, especially as they were getting closer to graduation. Residents start caring about this stuff in a way that you don't think about earlier, right? Like if you get a contract, what does this mean? Or how much am I really going to make and how am I going to pay off those student loans? And fortunately at the time, there was actually a certified financial planner that was employed by the university to help the medical students and the residents through the GME office. And we started working together and teaching residents at the university, both in my own department and across the university. And one day, as these things often go, he offhandedly said, "Have you ever thought about doing this as a career, meaning financial planning?" And he really encouraged me to start thinking more and more about getting my CFP certification. And at the beginning of the pandemic, when we all had a little more time because we had a break from clinical duties, I started getting certified in the state of Oregon and working towards my CFP and taking on some of my first clients. So it's been a fun journey, a tough journey, but enjoyable.
So you mentioned that story when you were an anesthesiologist 20 years ago, teaching personal finance to the residents. In the last 20 years, what's your assessment of the evolution of financial literacy among the physician community?
You know, what's interesting, Kevin, I think especially amongst the residents, there is a strong desire and hunger for more information. I would get approached all the time, and many people had great, insightful questions of, should I do a Roth? They'd clearly done some reading. And I think part of that has to do with the explosion of student loans over the last 2 decades. I mean, the average student debt is well above $200,000 now. Most physicians, at least once you're in practice, aren't going to benefit from that $10,000 or $20,000 that President Biden just announced. But I think there's definitely more interest and more engagement. And there's been, certainly within medicine, there's been an explosion in the financial independence, retire early community. So there's more out there. That being said, it's not uncommon for me to see pretty big financial mistakes. I serve as the treasurer of my group, and I've seen different things that get happen, whether someone's trying to short their market in their retirement account, anything like that. It often amazes me, some of the things that people are doing with their money.
So you mentioned that there is a whole physician financial space that has been exploding over the last 5 to 10 years. But in terms of formal education that these new physicians and residents get, is there any evolution in that?
Great question. I think so. What I find really fascinating is most of the people doing the teaching tend to be either in anesthesiology or in emergency medicine. I'm not totally sure what to make of that. But what I've found is you have someone similar to my background that takes an interest in this and starts really pushing that in their department and then their university. And across the country, it's slowly creeping out. It's certainly nothing that's been mandated by the GME for all residents, although I think many of us believe strongly that it should be, especially early in your career. But it really is a grassroots thing where more and more people understand the absolute power of understanding how money works and teaching their residents so they can make better choices once they graduate.
All right, let's talk about your KevinMD article. It's titled,
Sure.
"There Are So Many Paths to Financial Freedom." Now, for those of you who get a chance to read your article, just walk my audience through it. Share the story why you decided to write it.
Sure. Yeah. So I think it's interesting to see right now. I think, especially in the physician finance space, I think one of the more popular things that you'll come across all the time is real estate. And there's a lot of people that have different courses that they'll teach you, or they'll even go further and say, this is the only way to build wealth. And so I'll often work with clients who come to me and they have 5 different things they want to do. They want to be investing in the market. They want to be investing in real estate. They might want to buy like a rental property or any of these things. And so what I wanted to tell our physician colleagues are, there really are a million different ways that you can get wealthy and you can build financial independence. The key is to pick one of those paths and stick with it instead of doing the flavor of the month, so to speak. And this certainly isn't a criticism of any of those methods, but I think my concern was what ends up happening is, especially for those people who don't really understand finance or investing, they just get overwhelmed because there's so many choices. And instead of picking one of those things, they do nothing and they stay stuck. They don't pay off their loans. They're not really investing in the market or in real estate or any of those other things. And so they're actually losing ground every single day because they just feel overwhelmed.
So you mentioned that there are other options other than real estate, and even within the umbrella of real estate, there are just so many options within that.
So many options.
Talk to us about some of those other options.
I think for many physicians, especially employed physicians, one of the simplest ways is just investing in retirement accounts. And that has one of the biggest benefits of saving you on taxes now, which I think for almost every physician is one of the biggest hurdles to building wealth, right? We're in one of the highest, if not the highest tax bracket, and we just don't get that many tax credits or deductions. And so an easy way, without taking too much of their own time, is to invest in their own retirement accounts.
You have a lot of exposure to physician clients. Are you seeing a lot of physicians not taking full advantage of their retirement accounts?
Especially in my new role as treasurer, I was surprised to see that. But yes, more than you would think. And even in a higher earning specialty like anesthesia, I think that's very much true. Just to give you an example, in our own group, we have access to a 401k and then a cash balance plan. So we can put quite a bit of money aside. But even amongst mid and late career physicians, a lot of those physicians aren't maxing out their 401k, which tells you they may be saving in other places, but based on conversations around the water cooler with them, that's not the case. And to go even further, quite a few physicians are using 401k loans or taking money out of their retirement savings for other things. And it's interesting being in the finance space because you see someone like White Coat Investor or others who are doing amazing things and have done so much to educate our physician colleagues. And it's very easy to think that most physicians have their ducks in a row, so to speak. But once you peel behind the curtain, you realize a lot of people are in a lot of trouble with their finances.
So you mentioned maxing out your retirement savings as one way. What are some other ways?
I think for a lot of physicians who are interested in it and have the time, I live in Bend, Oregon, where there's a lot of vacation rentals. And I know a lot of my partners have essentially bought a property and then bought a new property to live in and turned that other into a vacation rental. What they'll all tell you is it's far from passive income. It actually ends up taking quite a bit of time. You have to stay up to date on regulations, got to make sure you have tenants and all those sorts of things. But it's a fantastic way to build wealth that way. I think for a lot of physicians, if you want to be a little more hands-off, you can invest in real estate syndications where you're essentially paying someone else to be the expert and they're the general partner, so to speak, and they're doing the due diligence and they're looking at these deals. You're providing the capital. And so that's a nice way to have exposure to that space without being a day-to-day landlord. I think a lot of physicians like that.
And I get a lot of questions about syndications. Just for those not familiar with that, how does one go about finding a syndication? And in general, how much does one need to put up?
I think the way to think about this, Kevin, it's almost like crowdfunding, right? And so there's many syndications now that are dropping their minimums to $5,000 and $10,000, whereas in the past, many were 25 or 50,000. Wasn't uncommon to see $100,000 or $250,000. So you ended up having really concentrated positions, which for physicians may not be desirable. But now you can actually get exposure. If you wanted to put 50,000 in, you could do 5 different deals, whether that's through your site or White Coat Investor or others. There actually are quite a few linked there. I tend to go through White Coat Investor actually quite a bit, in part because on a lot of the articles there, you'll see people who have invested in those deals and they can give you a lot of background on what has gone and what hasn't. But there's quite a few companies out there. Part of it is doing a little bit of background yourself and seeing what those companies like to invest in, whether that's big apartment complexes, things of that nature, and what sort of money they're promising you. Another big piece, as opposed to being in the market, even with your retirement accounts, is understanding that money is getting locked up for 5-10 years and making sure that's okay for your current financial position.
Anything outside the world of real estate that you would recommend to physicians?
That's a good question. For some people, I think what you're seeing more and more, and this one I think is, you want to be a little more entrepreneurial, but you're a perfect example of this. If you have the passion and the talent, is building a business. I think I look around at all of our physician colleagues, and it's one of the things that's so fun about listening to your podcast and reading the posts is just seeing the amazing things that our colleagues are doing. And whether it's building a business, dermatologists building businesses related to skincare products or something like that, people doing physician coaching. I remember one physician who made like a little, basically a doggy potty, right? Like where he'd go out on the porch, doing all sorts of fun things. And I can tell you, as someone building his own business, it's hard, but it's very rewarding and very fun. And I think knowing how brilliant and talented our colleagues are, betting on yourself is a great way to do it. I think that's one of the best ones.
So I talked to a lot of physicians and they're just overwhelmed by their clinical duties. Like, I'm a primary care physician, and you hear so many stories about these doctors getting burned out. They see 30 to 40 patients a day. They have to chart until 2 a.m. How on earth are they supposed to get past that inertia of being just overwhelmed by the clinical duties, and let alone start to research another source of income? Like, how can they just get out of that rut and start doing some of the things that you recommend them doing?
I'm so glad that you asked that, Kevin. And I see that same overwhelm and just that feeling of being stuck. And I remember, I'll be totally frank, I remember feeling that way a couple of years ago. And just by happenstance, I ran into a colleague, an OB colleague, one night when I was on call at 2 or 3 a.m, who did physician coaching. And she didn't work with male clients, but she made some recommendations, and I started working with a coach. And what I tell you is, so much of that is actually mindset and just changing the way that you view the world and your circumstances. But part of the reason I'm doing what I'm doing in finance myself is to give people better choices and let them see that they actually can do things like work part-time, or maybe it is retire at 55 instead of 60. But for many of my clients, especially in anesthesia, it's definitely easier for us to slow down. But there was a point early in the pandemic when we all had a little more time. Well, most of us did, for depending on where you were in the country, and things just slowed down and stopped. And there was this collective sense that we were working too hard. And I think all of us looked at all the things that we were missing, whether that was time with family, time with friends, time for our own health. And now I feel like we're busier than we've ever been with even fewer resources. It feels worse than ever. And so I think the first question is to take some time and ask yourself what's truly important to you. Part of this journey for me was really personal, Kevin. One of my closest friends from medical school passed away 4 years ago this month, actually, which is hard for me to believe. He was an anesthesiologist as well, and one of the best people I knew. Just so much fun, would do anything for any of his friends, amazing skier. The amount of fun we had out in the mountains together was just incalculable. And now he's gone. And I think each of us, at least speaking for myself, and certainly seeing what I see with clients, we act like we have all the time in the world, when really that's our most precious resource. And it's come home for me. We have a almost 1-year-old. I just turned 46 myself, so it's been eye-opening, the lack of sleep. But it's been one of those slap in the face of, you need to be home and seeing this, because he is not going to be this young forever. And the too long piece of this is it's taking the time to get quiet and sit with the people that are important to you and spend some time just reflecting on, am I living the life that I want to live? And am I spending my time in ways that are in alignment with what I value, what I really value, not what I say I value, but what I really value. And there's lots of resources out there. Like I said, I worked with a coach, which was game changing for me. Part of it is getting your finances together, but more than any of that, it's just dreaming and hoping again. And I think that's important. That's what I want to see. I want to work with clients. I want to work with other physicians who are so happy to be at work because they have all those other things in alignment, where they're taking care of their family, they're taking care of their health, they're taking care of their community. That's my dream, to work with all of our physician colleagues that are just that happy and excited.
We're talking to Cobin Soelberg. He's an anesthesiologist and financial planner. His KevinMD article is titled, "There Are So Many Paths to Financial Freedom." Cobin, what are some of your take-home messages that you want to leave with the KevinMD audience?
Is this to sit down and take the time to ask yourself if you're living the life that you really want to be living. I think what we do in healthcare is powerful and important and incredible in many ways, but it's not the only thing that we need to be focusing on. And certainly as a financial planner, getting your finances in order is one of the first steps on that. But I see amazing people every single day, and you guys are doing amazing things, so keep doing them.
Cobin, thank you so much for sharing your time and insight. Thanks again for being on the show.
Thank you, Kevin.